Hello everyone! Today in this video we are going to compare the military strength of NATO countries versus Russia plus China. But before we begin, let's find out what NATO is. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, in short NATO, is an intergovernmental military alliance between 28 European countries and 2 North American countries, USA and Canada. Although all the 30 NATO member countries are not militarily powerful, USA led the group with the likes of France and UK, which are all nuclear power countries. Some countries which are not nuclear power yet are military capable, that are in NATO includes Germany, Turkey, Italy, Spain, and so on. NATO constitutes a system of collective security, whereby its independent member states agree to mutual defense in response to an attack by any external party. Let's get started. First, let's compare the population. The NATO member countries' total population is around 960 million, which is roughly 12% of the world's population, whereas Russia and China total population is around 1.56 billion, which is roughly 20% of the world's population. Economic power comparison. The NATO member countries' combined GDP nominal is around 44 trillion US dollars, while GDP in purchasing power parity term is around 50 trillion US dollars. Russia and China, on the other hand, has a combined GDP nominal of around 18.5 trillion US dollars, while in GDP purchasing power parity term is around 31 trillion US dollars. Nuclear power comparisons. Among the NATO members, the USA has the largest number of nuclear weapons, followed by France and UK. While both Russia and China are countries that possess nuclear weapons, both NATO members and Russia-China have triad capability, with long-range ICBMs, submarine launch ballistic missile, and long-range bombers and air-based missiles. Military personnel comparisons. The NATO countries' combined active personnel is around 3.35 million and has around 2.2 million reserve military personnel, whereas Russia and China active military personnel is around 3 million and has around 2.5 million personnel in reserve. Land power comparisons. Main battle tanks. NATO members' total tanks is around 15,600. Whereas Russia and China total tanks, including in reserve, is approximately 18,500. Armored vehicles. The NATO countries' combined armored vehicles is around 110,200, whereas Russia and China has around 70,000 armored vehicles. Self-propelled artillery. The NATO member states currently have around 5,050 total self-propelled artillery, whereas Russia and China has 3,300 plus self-propelled artillery. Multiple launch rocket system. NATO members around 2,770, whereas Russia and China has around 3,250 plus active multiple launch rocket system and around 2,000 in reserve. Towed artillery. The NATO members currently have around 5,480 total towed artillery, whereas Russia and China has around 4,000 towed artillery in active and 6,000 plus in reserve, although most of the towed artillery in reserve are old and outdated. Air power comparisons. Total aircraft. NATO member states currently have around 21,000 total aircraft, whereas Russia and China currently have around 9,000 plus total aircraft. Fighter jet and interceptors comparisons. NATO members currently have around 3,530 plus fighter jets and interceptors, whereas Russia and China currently have around 2,800 fighter jets and interceptors. Some of the main fighter jets used by the NATO member countries are Stealth F-22 Raptor and Stealth F-35 Lightning II, Dassault Rafale, F-16, F-15, F-18, Eurofighter Typhoons, Jas-39 Gripen, etc. On the other hand, Russia and China use Stealth Su-57, Stealth J-20, Su-35, Su-30, Su-27, Su-34, MiG-29, MiG-31, J-10, J-8, J-11. Total helicopter comparison. NATO members currently have around 8,500 helicopters, whereas Russia and China have around 2,500 total helicopters. Naval power comparison. Total naval ships comparison including auxiliaries. NATO members approximately have around 5,470 total naval ships, whereas Russia and China has approximately 1,150 plus total naval ships. Aircraft carrier. NATO member states currently has 17 aircraft carrier, of which 12 are nuclear-powered carriers, whereas Russia and China has 3 aircraft carriers. Helicopter carrier. NATO members currently have 14 helicopter carriers, whereas Russia and China has 3 helicopter carriers. Cruisers. A cruiser is a type of warship and are generally the largest ships in a fleet after aircraft carriers and amphibious assault ships, and can usually perform several roles. NATO member states have 22 guided missile cruisers, whereas Russia and China currently have 5 cruisers. Destroyers. A destroyer is a fast maneuverable long-endurance warship intended to escort larger vessels in a fleet, convoy, or battle group, and defend them against powerful short-range attackers. NATO member states currently have around 90 destroyer ships, whereas Russia and China have around 60 destroyers. Frigates. Frigates are warships that are smaller than destroyers and has varying role in battle. Currently, the NATO members have around 135 frigates, whereas Russia and China has around 61 frigates. Corvettes. A corvette is a small warship that are smaller than frigates. Currently, the NATO member states have around 54 corvettes, whereas Russia and China currently have around 154 corvettes. Submarines. The NATO member states currently have around 146 submarines, of which around 90 are nuclear-powered submarines, whereas Russia and China currently have around 148 submarines, of which 50 plus are nuclear-powered submarines. Thanks for watching.